Good evening. I am so excited that I have uh County Council Kai Hagen with me tonight. I'm excited. And you are this will be our second time because last time it was just like and then
Well,
so now
if I can just the quick background for people who might be wondering what you were referring to is that this is our fourth try. So the very first time Terrellin was called away because of an emergency when the tragedy when the police officer was shot
yeah.
in Baltimore. The second time I had a terrible, terrible connection from home where I do not have cable, so it was a cellular modem, and we had to stop because it was just ridiculous. I kept getting disconnected. Then the third time we had an emergency short scheduled board of health meeting scheduled for exactly the time that we were supposed to talk. um, so this is our fourth time. I'm in the city. I've got a good internet connection. You're not called away on any emergencies. There's no board of health meeting. Hopefully, we'll get through the whole hour, and I'll maintain a decent connection at my mother's house. That's where I am.
We will the connection has been great, so I am very optimistic.
I am too. I would
So
just have to keep my mom and her dog quiet in the
your
background.
mom and dog is okay. So I have we got some questions to ask you. I know you're running you're running a race right now.
Yeah,
And so how do you feel about it?
I feel really good about it. I mean,
Yeah.
we made a decision early to do this. I made a decision early to do this in consultation with others, and so and so did one of my opponents. Also got a really early start, so it's been part of our lives every day for a good while now. But we're going from that part of the campaign where smart campaigns that are getting out early and are making plans and raising some money and developing some materials and all of the other things that you do early. But when it's not really that public, it's the people you're talking to. But there's no yard signs out, there's no candidate forums, you're not getting a lot of media coverage, there's you're not doing mailings yet, just email to a smaller list. And so we're going right now from that period where the campaign is kind of, in the background a little bit for a lot of
Mhm.
people, and to sort of what I described rounding the bend to the home stretch. Right,
Yes.
the primary is June 28th,
Yes.
which is a little more than 4 months away.
Mhm.
And in the next month or so, we're going to see everything pick up. You're going to start seeing
Yeah.
yard signs, candidate forums, articles in the
Yep.
paper. People will be getting mail at their house about the campaigns, all that stuff, and just generally paying more attention. We'll be knocking on doors and having volunteers out and more, public events, and hopefully, and so I think describing it as rounding the corner into the home stretch fits really well right now.
And
So,
I agree with you. I'm feeling that what you just said I'm feeling. So I agree.
well,
I
you're a candidate too. You're in your own campaign, so
Yeah,
you should be
yeah.
feeling that.
So let me ask you, what made you run for county council, and now what made you run for county executive?
Well, when I had a lifelong connection to Frederick County, but I didn't live here until 1995, so 27 years ago, next month, in fact. And from the time got here, I got involved. Less than 2 weeks after we'd moved, I was attending a Sierra Club meeting in the basement of the Lutheran Church across the street from Winchester Hall. I was paying attention and getting to know local government, a lot of the issues, knowing that I was always somebody who got involved wherever I lived, but that this was going to be my home for the rest of my life. That was just a natural thing. So I got involved in a lot of different ways around the environment and land use in particular. I was chair of the local Sierra Club. I was appointed to the zoning review committee, which spent a year and a half working on county land use issues. Before long, I was writing columns in the Frederick News Post and the Gazette about local issues, just paying attention, being involved. Never thought I'd run for anything, never had political ambitions, didn't want to do that. But in 2004, 2005, we were working on some pretty high profile issues. There was a lot of frustration with the Board of County Commissioners at that time, or the majority of the Board of County Commissioners, I should say. And people started encouraging me to run. And at first I said, no, but you keep having the conversation, you look at who else is getting in the race. And in the end, it seemed like an opportunity to fill a gap that needed to be filled and to have an impact on the same things I always cared about in a new way, a way that I had not expected. And we put together a really great campaign in 2006, and I won. So I was elected to be one of the 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners, which was both the executive and the legislative branch. Sat next to Jan Gardner on that Board of County Commissioners for 4 years. And we did everything that the county executive has to do and that the council has to do today. The only difference is it all happens in public and you've got to debate it and discuss it all with 4 colleagues to make any decisions. So, which actually, is a very positive thing in many ways, challenging also. And so, after that term, I ran for re-election and didn't win. It was 2010 was the worst year for Democrats around the country in over a century. Not many won in any, purple counties around the country. It was an awful year everywhere. But I stayed involved. Right. I didn't go away. I just stayed involved. I became the director of Envision Frederick County and spent the next 10 years as the director of Envision Frederick County until a little more than a year ago. And it's still going and has a great board and a great new director who took my place. And just very excited that we built something that is going to last and that is doing some great work. But anyway, in 2014, we had the first election for the new charter government, right? So electing the first county executive and the first county council, which was 7 council members, and Jan and Gardner competing against Blaine Young to be the first county executive. And of course, I had very strong feelings about that, supported Jan greatly, was very worried about what would have happened if Blaine Young and a bad council got elected at that point. But I didn't run. I just stayed really as involved and supportive as I could. And that was a close election in a lot of ways, not for Jan. She beat Blaine pretty handily, but there were 3 Democrats elected, 3 Republicans, really 4 Republicans, including Bud Otis. But they had a falling out and Bud Otis became an unaffiliated voter. So you had a real split council, but not split in the way the one is now, split with really tremendous polarization. People didn't get along with each other. And there was a lot of concern coming into 2018 because Jerry Donald had only won his first election by 25 votes.
Right.
And if Ellen Bartlett had won that election, it would have been Ellen Bartlett and Billy Shreve and Kirby DeLauder and Tony Schmeller. And Bud Otis wouldn't have been the swing vote or the president of the council. They would have, our first term with charter government would have had a council with a majority that was totally at odds with our new county executive, Jan Gardner, would have been highly dysfunctional. And it didn't turn out that way with Bud and with MC as president, vice president. And, even though it was challenging at times, things worked out, but people had a lot of concerns about what could happen in 2018. So I decided to run for council at large when people started talking to me about that.
So now I thank you for that history, Kai, because a lot of people did not know that. So I learned something. So I think now we are now into 2022 elections and you're running for county executive. There has been a lot of things that's happened during COVID that the county council and county executive have been under the radar. You've had things happen in the school systems. You've had things happen with the sheriff department, with the raises. We had so many things happening. And now we're under the same pressure of Republicans possibly shaking some things up. Um, how do you feel about that? And what would you do differently as a county executive? And what is your game plan to make sure that you move Frederick forward and we don't
Well,
move?
I mean, elections have consequences, and
Mhm.
obviously, right now, we don't have to speculate about who the Republican candidate is going to be. In all likelihood, it's going to be Michael Huff. He announced a long time ago. He's raised a ton of money. He's pretty much cleared the field. He doesn't have a primary opponent. It's always possible someone would get in the race, but we're pretty safe, I think, at this point, assuming that Michael Huff is going to be the Republican nominee. And that's sort of like knowing that Blaine Young was going to be the Republican nominee. That means that there's going to be a very dramatic contrast between the Republican candidate and whoever wins the Democratic primary. Now, I hope that's me. We're certainly going to do everything we can, but and no matter who it is, whether it's me or Jessica or Daryl, there's going to be a very dramatic contrast between one of us and Michael Huff, and a great deal at stake. You hope that you have a good council that can make a big difference no matter who wins on a lot of fronts. But this is when the charter was written, it was a strong executive model, and the county executive can have a very dramatic effect on a lot of things. And if it's Michael Huff, I will be, and a lot of other people, I think, will be deeply, if not gravely, concerned about the impact that that could have on many of the things that we care about in Frederick County. So, I feel that, I wouldn't run if I didn't think that I was the right person at the right time for this job and the best chance to beat Michael Huff. I believe those things. I'm sure other people do too, and some people don't, right? But, that is my reason for running. I have no political ambitions. I know that sounds really weird when you say that and you've been running, but but I mean, I have no long-term political ambitions, right?
Mhm.
I mean, if I win or lose, this will be the last, job I will ever have,
Right.
uh, I'm going to do the absolute best that I can if I win to, uh, you know, make sure that the consequences that the election have are very positive ones that people feel very good about and leave a really strong legacy. And when you ask me what I would do differently, I mean, Jan and I have known each other for a long time, sat next to each other on the Board of County Commissioners. I've been very supportive of her overall as a member of the County Council, and in the 8 years between my two times in elected office. Well, 4 years she wasn't in elected office at all, but her first term as a county executive. That doesn't mean we're exactly the same people or that we share all the same goals and values. I think they largely overlap. I think in many ways, Frederick County has been extremely fortunate to have her as our first county executive to set
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
expectation and the tone.
And a
That
woman, and a woman at that.
Sure, but the nature of the role, right, and how things are. She's done a great job in a
Mhm.
lot of
Mhm.
ways.
Mhm.
So, I think with my experience with and knowledge of county government, of Frederick County, the particular set of values and goals that I bring, I think part of what I've been talking about when I talk to people is that when I say I'm the right person, there's different components to that. I think I'm the right and best person to protect what we love about Frederick County
Mhm.
and maintain what we are already doing well. County government, I believe it is our way as a community acting in a collective manner to elect and support, activity and public services and infrastructure and planning and a whole lot of other things in our community for the betterment of our community, for our quality of life now and in the future. And I think protecting those things that we love about where we live and maintaining effectively and efficiently those things that Frederick County government currently does really well. And that's a lot of things. And then, in addition to that, being ready and able to effectively address some of the new challenges that we're having and deal with some of the things that we have to do better. We're looking at huge problems like affordable housing. We have
Right.
all of the
Right.
challenges
Right.
and we have all of the challenges and the opportunities that come
Right.
with growth pressures and how
Right.
we think about economic development and everything else. We want to maintain what we've done well, right?
Right.
So
And I'm glad that you said that because one, I need to put a little plug in there. Like we need, I don't care what that you support. Make sure you support Democrat, and we know that we need to get out and vote because we do not want to Michael Huff to win that got endorsed by Donald Trump. Like we can't do that. So it is my show, my
Michael Huff, technically, I don't know if Michael Huff's been endorsed by Donald Trump, but I can say this about him without making him the subject of too much of our time.
Oh, we're not making him the subject at all. I'm just putting
No,
a
no, but I do want to.
no, we cannot have Michael Huff win an election. I'm going to say
No,
that
that's true.
publicly.
Let me just remind people. Let me just remind people that he is trying very hard and has a great deal of money to help him do that, to rebrand himself as kind of an anti-sprawl, anti-school overcrowding, anti-traffic sort of, law and order, less regulation, lower taxes candidate. But he was Donald Trump's campaign chair in Frederick County. He supported him strongly and avidly. He worked for years with ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Commission or Council, I think it is, that is a far right-wing think tank that creates all of these far right-wing pieces of legislation for local governments, county governments, municipal governments around the country on a broad range of issues, from gun control to property rights and school, public education, and things like that. He is the chief of staff to this day for Alex Mooney, who got his political start in Frederick County, but moved to West Virginia, ran for Congress, and is one of the most far right, congressmen in Washington today. So people need to know.
Get out and vote.
We'll find more ways to remind them later. And that's enough for now.
Well, yeah, he gets no more energy on my show, Kai. So, so get out and vote. The moral of the story is get out and vote. So now you talked about the issues that we are dealing with in Frederick. I'm glad you brought that up, which we don't have very many issues. I think we have some sprinkle here and there. Like you said, the affordable housing, the economic development. You were very vocal in the past about equity and diversity. I remember you wanting to present a bill about this, and we were, and you did, and you did well with that. So how would you work more to bring diversity? I'm going to be honest. I do not like the hashtag word diversity and all those things, because it's like we say it, but then are we really doing it? So how are you going to make sure that it's implemented, that the community can see it, and we are moving forward to make people feel like they are part of Frederick? Because let's be honest, we are welcoming refugees into our community, and we want to make them feel like it's home. We are bringing in other minorities into our community, and we want to make it feel like it's home. And I have heard some people say that it does not feel like home. They do not feel included. So how would you do that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that the substantially growing diversity in our community is absolutely one of the absolute best things about our growth. It's something to celebrate, but there are challenges as we go from not long ago largely rural community beyond the then exurbs. Now we're kind of almost suburban, right? And although we have and in many ways, certainly not in others, but I think that growing diversity is a really, really wonderful thing to celebrate, but it also presents some challenges as the community changes. And this is, I love Frederick County. I came here to live here the rest of my life, but it is the least diverse place I've ever lived besides my college campus, probably. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was in a very small minority of white students through junior high school and high school. So, you really notice that's
right
different about Frederick County. But growing up in my family with its politics, in my community with my mother very involved in public education and the issues that I worked on there, and the social justice issues I worked on for much of my adult life, along with the environmental work that I was doing. I mean, I think it's a top priority. I mean, because it's not about how much time you spend in that versus other things. It's something that should be part and parcel of everything we're doing. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is, you know, with Jan's very strong engagement and support and initiative and things and the efforts that I put into for 2 years to draft and pass legislation to deal with these things, and these two efforts merged. The We have now, an equity and inclusion department,
Mhm.
an equity and inclusion officer in law, not just created by the executive as somebody within her office that the next executive could just, ignore or get rid of. Creating a equity and inclusion, a commission, and one of the most important part of the pieces of that legislation that I absolutely, kept focusing on throughout the entire 2 year process, and then working with Jan and everything else, was that the county, this new commission and the equity officer are going to be developing, along with the support and ultimately the approval, presumably of others as well, um, a process by which we evaluate all legislation in Frederick
Mhm.
County
Mhm.
through the lens of racial equity and
Mhm.
inclusion,
Mhm.
everything. So that, it's advisory, but it means that we're not going to be making a major land use decision or affordable housing issue, or all these other issues, some of which will be seen directly connected to issues of equity, and some will not necessarily appear that way, uh, you know, directly to some people. But in many cases, that doesn't mean there aren't real issues there.
Right. Right.
And, um, and so that will always be part of the discussion. Once that process is put in place, every bill will come along with, as part of the staff report, a thoughtful and in some cases very thorough, when it's an issue where those things are relevant, or deemed relevant by the committee. Um, There'll be that public information, that public discussion and debate about the impact of that legislation on equity. That's going to happen for everything the council does moving forward, in much the same way that we need to formalize the process for doing that, and looking at everything through the lens of climate change, which is the other thing, that we did as a council. We said, that this is an emergency, and we are going to look at everything we do through that lens, and we still have to develop a formal process for making sure that that's done in an adequate and effective manner. So moving forward, we will be always evaluating things through the lens of equity and climate change. And I'm real excited about both of those things.
So I'm glad you talked about climate change because that is my next question. So I know you are an environmentalist. You're like
No,
like you are like really good in environment. Like I need to come and sit and pick your brain about environment and global warming and climate change and
anytime.
all those things. And so we know climate change is real. Like it is happening. You
Mhm.
have what's happened in Kentucky. You have snowstorms in Texas. You have snowstorms in Atlanta. You have weather that is making people, countries be without water, people having too much water. You have so many things happening. Now, when we talk about Frederick with climate change and global warming, I know one of the things that I'm really passionate about is having electric buses, especially electric
Mhm.
school buses, and community gardens. I think those are really important. I know it's not really a county, like that's just really small, but I just know what could I think of to make Frederick better. We have the solar panels that could be put on housing authority, the affordable housing homes and things like
All right.
that.
Well, we
So
have no shortage of things to
yeah.
do. I mean,
So what
you
would
know,
you be doing as a county executive for climate change?
well, a lot. And here's the thing, a few points to make that are related to that. First of all, we are not an island. Frederick County is, you know, directly affected by things that
Mhm.
are happening regarding climate change, even if we're not the ones experiencing the flooding, or coastal sea level rise, or major record-setting droughts like the West Coast and other parts of the world, or fires, or
Mhm.
any number of other things that we're seeing in other places. The shifts are going to be dramatic and global, and they'll affect cultural and geopolitical and economic things that we are connected to and that will affect us. And you know, it's already too late. We've already baked into the cake a lot
Yeah.
of very unfortunate things when it comes to the impacts of climate change that we know. But we're in a situation where when people say all of the above, that couldn't be more true, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to do everything we can at the national level, the state level, the local level, in our personal lives, in our businesses, to reduce our contribution to the emissions. We need to do everything we can to sequester more carbon and remove carbon, into the soil, into our forests, and other ways. And we need to be smart in recognizing the risks and the changes that are coming, and to make the adaptations make us more resilient. Whether that's dealing with stormwater management and land use and development patterns, and or whether it's related to some of the other impacts of climate. So when uh, Jessica and I sponsored the climate emergency resolution that Frederick County Council passed, it created the climate emergency mobilization work group, and they spent, under the co-chairs of Barb Trader and Kevin Sellner, a year with like more than 10,000 hours of volunteer time, and more than 60 individual people with a broad range of expertise and experience, developing through a remarkably well managed and organized process an incredibly great report. And if I'm using a lot of superlatives, it's because they are appropriate here. And I encourage everybody to go to mobilizefrederick.org, I think it is. Um, the report is in two parts. You can skip or review, if you want, all the technical parts and justifications and details, but it includes a very um, thorough list of priority recommendations for things that we can do in Frederick County to reduce emissions, sequester carbon, and be more resilient in the face of change. And there's people working right now on what's the next step, and what legislation will get introduced, and what are some of the other things we can do, and everything else. And so, thank you for putting that there. Um, and so, but here's the message that I want to get about that. Some people say, well, we can't afford it, or there's so much sacrifice that's involved, or it'll cost. The thing is, sorry, I'm so close to the camera, it's like every time I move around a little bit I disappear off the screen. But I keep making this point to people. It's not about, first of all, we can't afford not to take this issue seriously. And some people say, yeah, but what we do in Frederick County is not going to be enough. We all have to do everything we can. But the message that people need to hear is we don't pass one big omnibus climate change bill that covers everything. It's going to come in many different pieces related to transit and smart growth and regenerative agriculture and energy conservation and the transition to electric vehicles and all these other things, preserving and planting forests, on and on and on. And the fact of the matter is, and this is very easy to demonstrate, because they're going to come in individual pieces, 95% of all of those recommendations and the things that we can and should do to address this problem in our community are smart things to do, even if climate change wasn't happening. In other words, conserving energy and exporting fewer dollars from our county, keeping it in the local economy, getting ahead of the curve in the transition to, electric vehicles. If you talk about regenerative agriculture, you're talking about more resilient agriculture, reduced stormwater management, fewer, pesticides and chemical uses. Every single one of these things is something we should, almost every one of them is something we could and should do anyway, even if climate change wasn't a problem. But because it is, it adds an extra layer of urgency to moving with alacrity in addressing some of these things. So, you can look at that report and see essentially, a part of Kai Hagen's platform for county executive. Obviously, we're going to pick those things that are politically possible first, or have the biggest impact, or the best return on investment, or whatever. But we're going to try to move quickly on some of those things. And I think the community will benefit in all sorts of ways. Just for example, you don't think about it, but if every car in the community was electric, which will happen, in the not too distant future, the local air will be cleaner and fewer problems related to health and asthma and other things. So all these things have ancillary benefits as well that we'll see. Oh, your mic is off.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So now transportation is a huge issue. We
Mhm.
have a lot of people that live in Frederick but do not work in Frederick.
That's
So
right.
the commute
40%.
is, yep. And then we have people that work on weekends or nights and don't have vehicles, and the bus transportation is not available. You have people that work at Amazon, and that's what job they can get. They can't get to work because of the bus transportation. I mean, you have so many transportation issues. What would you do as a county executive to improve those transportation issues?
Well, the way I make this comment often in the context of a lot of different things, but it's particularly true of some things, including transportation, and that is that great problems call for many small solutions. So sometimes people are looking for some big, expensive silver bullet thing, some, dramatic groundbreaking and ribbon cutting new project or new highway or something like that. And that's not usually the best way to solve a problem. And transportation is a good example of that. I was on the Washington Council of Governments Transportation Planning Board. You're muted again. But I was on the I see why. The kids. But I was on the Washington Council of Governments Transportation Planning Board. It's an issue I've been paying attention to for a very long time, and the fact is that we have been taking an approach that hasn't worked, and we keep trying to do more of it, and it still doesn't work. And then we try to do more of it. And it's very expensive to build, to maintain. It doesn't have the benefits and the impacts that we hope it will have. And yet we start learning from that experience. So, how we grow is critical. Um, if you're pursuing real smart growth principles, that's about a lot more than transit, but it has a big effect on transit. You're trying to make communities that are more walkable, that are more serviceable in terms of the economics of providing public transit options. More bike paths. If you're creating a sustainable, diverse economy, maintaining what makes an attractive place for businesses, with good jobs to come to. A certain percentage of the people can work here instead of driving down the road. But geography is destiny in some ways, not in all ways. There's a lot we can control, but the fact that we're close to Washington and Baltimore and to the DC suburbs and Northern Virginia, that creates challenges associated with growth pressures, but are also real opportunities if we manage it properly. But because of that proximity, when our population was half of what it is today, 40%, 40 to 42% of the people who live in Frederick County and had a job left the county every day to work, because that's where the jobs were, or that's where the better paying jobs were, in Washington, Baltimore, Northern Virginia, Rockville, Gaithersburg, etc. Today, since then, we've doubled our population. We've more than doubled the number of jobs. So we've done a good job with economic development, being an attractive place for businesses to own, and with a fairly diverse economy that is resilient in many ways, and has a AAA bond rating and a high quality of life that is part of what attracts companies to an area. And yet, in spite of all of that, the percentage of people who have a job and live in Frederick County that commute out of the county is still about 40%. And we have more people than before commuting into the county from places like Washington County, Adams County, West Virginia. So people talk about, well, let's just focus on creating the jobs here and people won't have to commute down the road. That is not the way it's going to work. So what we want to do is create transit options, and there's traffic demand management and public transit options and the feasibility study that the governor and the Board of Works, supporting for a monorail. There's potential discussion about improving MARC. You got to do all those things and more as well as you can, as soon as you can, smartly as you can. But the answer of just building 4 more lanes that are toll lanes, that are based on an economic model in which you're not going to pay for the toll lane unless the other lanes, the free lanes, are congested, right? There's an equity issue there. There are climate issues there. But most importantly, from the perspective of someone who doesn't care about any of those things, or they care, but really they just want to be able to get to work, it's not going to solve their problem. We have so much research now about induced congestion and all around the country, multiple different states, different kinds of policies, different countries even. We build those 4 lanes, we're going to have 6 to 10 or 12 years of construction delays. We're going to get a brief respite during which time people who want to pay an exorbitant amount to drive at a guaranteed 35 or 45 miles an hour, and often maybe 50 or 55 miles an hour, will get that option. Others who take the free lanes will continue to have traffic congestion because that's built into their economic model. And in a relatively few years, the congestion overall will be just as bad as it ever was. The only difference is it will be electric cars. So that's not the solution. That doesn't mean some models for improving or widening 270 that aren't reasonable. Like, I think we should be looking at the 2 reversible lanes down the middle, which doesn't have the same footprint and doesn't, but
I agree. I agree with everything you're saying. Bringing more jobs to Frederick that are affordable, it is going to create more congestion. People still
we're gonna continue to grow. People are going to
we're gonna continue
to add jobs. We want to attract a good diversity of companies that provide good jobs, and that is going to happen. But the percentage of people, it's not going to reduce the number or percentage.
No, it will not. It will not.
That are going to leave the county, because it will still be cheaper to buy a home here for someone who's willing to commute to get a bigger house for the same amount of money, or a less expensive house, or more land, or travel in that direction to get a higher paying job. That's just the economics of it.
And let's be honest, Kai, it is expensive to live in Frederick. So
and that affordable housing is a huge issue. And that's another one of those things where I often say, big problems call for many small solutions. There is no silver bullet for affordable housing. And we do a lot of good things, but we can definitely do better.
And now we're talking about money and how expensive it is. We pay city and county taxes. And people have been complaining about this for a long time. But now people are even complaining more about this, especially, because the taxes are so high in Frederick. What would you do to curb that and make taxes?
Well, the county tax rate has essentially been the same. The property tax rate, income tax, has been, I don't know, 20 years. I'm not sure exactly. I should have that exact year, but a long time we have had exactly the same tax rate, with one blip, and that was a relatively minor blip when the Blaine Young Board of County Commissioners folded the fire tax district into the general fund, and a few parts of the county that had been benefiting ended up with a tax increase. Except for that, it's been the same rate and all along. And obviously, when assessments go up, when the value of your home goes up, or just like when you get a raise and you pay a higher income tax, your taxes can go up. That is not something to be taken lightly. But on the other hand, when you look at the quality of life, the quality of local facilities and services, taxes pay for, public health and animal control and water and sewer and planning and fire and rescue and, police, policing, the sheriff's department. And I could go agricultural preservation, and all of that and more fits into about half the budget, right? And the other half is education. And right now, even though Jan has been a big supporter of education her whole life. And that's why she even got involved in local government in the first place. That was the first connection, her engagement in local education issues, and has over the last 7 years supported Frederick County Public Schools at greater than maintenance of effort and made, some significant improvements there. We had a 6-year period with maintenance of effort where the value of that contribution was low, less and less. It was the same amount of money, but per student, but it was less and less able to accomplish the goals that we care about because things get more expensive. So anyway, to make a long story short, we had 6 years of maintenance of effort. We've had 7 years of trying to get back on space, and we are still have the lowest per pupil spending in the state of Maryland for any county. Now, our county share is about 15th. So we're not the lowest county share, but our total, when you add the state money and other sources of it, federal money, et cetera, Frederick County is right now supporting education at the lowest rate per pupil spending rate in the entire state of Maryland. We're competing to recruit and maintain and attract and retain teachers and other school employees against school districts all around us, some of which are much wealthier, and some of which are in other states because they're all close by. And we have to make a real, sincere, significant commitment to increasing that budget more. And I have a commitment to a 4-year plan to move Frederick County from the bottom of that list in per pupil funding to 12th. Now, I know that sounds weird, having a goal that says you're muted. To having a goal that says let's be number 12. That might sound weird, but in Maryland, moving from 24th to 12th in 4 years in a state where a lot of these counties are bigger and richer and have higher costs of living in some cases and everything else, that would be a very, very ambitious goal, but it's doable by my calculations. But the only way we're going to be able to do that is to maintain the current tax level, property tax rate for at least another 4 years, beyond which it'll be another administration, another county council. We'll see where the economy is and the budget is and everything else. But I can't see reducing the property tax rate during the next 4 years if we're going to make the kind of commitment to education that we're going to need to make.
Now, I'm glad you brought up education. Now, Kai, it would not be fair of me not to bring up, and a lot of people were upset that the superintendent was getting paid so much money. So, do you feel that should be decreased and more money should go? Now, let me finish because it was a big controversy. I don't get into the controversy things a lot because I don't know the full story. But when that salary came out and we have schools that are struggling and need to be renovated or things like that, how do you feel about that? What are you going to do as a county executive to ensure that we are putting more money into our kids and not and less money into superintendent's pocket?
Well, first of all, there are two different level money categories you might be talking about, and I'm not sure which
I don't
one.
know. I'm just going by.
Let me say, there was her annual salary, but then there was this package she got, at the end, including salary for a particular time, all of her on leave, et cetera. And you can talk to people at the Board of Education about whether or not that was the best way to do it and what they would have had to go through to take a different route and with the state and everything else. That is not the role of the county executive. We have an elected Board of Education that decides how to best balance and invest the school system's budget. It's not up to the county executive. With a county executive, county council, county government does not set those salaries.
So how would you improve it? You stated that you're going to put more money into the education. So if you guys are not in charge of that, then how would you make a difference?
Well, I mean, I have faith in not blind faith, but the fact is that I think if we can increase the funding for public schools to move from 24th in per pupil spending in Maryland to 12th over a 4-year period of time, a big part of that is going to come in the form of increasing salary and benefits for teachers and other Frederick County employees.
But you just said that you guys do not control that. You don't, county executive don't control that.
No, but the union negotiates, the Board of Education is elected. There certainly can be a lot of support. The person who's making the decision about whether to fund how much over maintenance of effort in a given year can certainly work to have some influence over that, but I don't want to overstep my role either. But I have confidence that, that money will enable us to much more effectively compete with attracting good teachers, retaining good teachers, paying, a better, decent wage to other Frederick County school employees. I mean, it's bus drivers and cafeteria workers and health. I mean, there's, we're talking about a lot of different people here who right now, some have been struggling in some cases or can't afford to live in Frederick County, or who are leaving because they can make significantly higher salaries, a reasonable commute away, or move to those places. And so education is an absolute top priority. I've always been endorsed by the teachers before. I think I've earned it and deserved it. It's something that, based on my personal experience growing up in the DC public schools and my mother's involvement in that, I think the impact, if you can't be the kind of community you want to be, with the kind of quality of life that you want to have, and be competitive and attract businesses and everything else without having top quality schools. And that means our VOTEC, means our community college, and everything else. And so that's a number one top priority. And we are not where we need to be. And we need to make an investment to get there. And we need to be honest about what that costs.
And I agree with,
without raising taxes. I just don't know if we could. I just don't think we can do it if we're reducing our property tax rates right now.
And I agree with you. So hopefully, if you become county executive, you'll be more involved with the budget. So I don't, because I don't know. I'm just saying, like, when you ask the county executive, she's like, oh, we don't have control over that. The Board of Education. When you ask the Board of Education, oh, we don't have control over that. So I just want to know who has control and how we can move things forward.
Well,
that is what you're going to do.
I mean, the Frederick County Public Schools works with the Board of Education to put together a recommendation for what their request. The county executive funds some or all of it above maintenance of effort after 6 years of not funding it above maintenance of effort under, before 2014 when that election, when that changed. The first 2 years of which were related to the recession, and every other part of county government was cut except for public schools, but there weren't increases during that very difficult and challenging time. And I remember that very well because, we had to go over that budget line by line, with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, not making across the board cuts, and protecting, education funding as much as we could. But during those 2 years, but then after that, the 4 years after the recovery was well underway, we had an administration in place, that last Board of County Commissioners, that chose to maintain maintenance of effort. And so that 6-year hole is very serious. And even with the additional funding that Jan has put in her budgets, and that the current and previous county councils have approved, it has not been enough.
Now, I thank you for that, Kai, and I'm pretty confident that you will do what needs to be done if you were to win your seat. And so let me ask you real quick. I can't leave without asking about this topic, the sheriff department. You mentioned the sheriff department. Now, you know that we have a huge issue with the sheriff department. I think you have made a public comment about this with the racial issues, but then we give the sheriff a raise. So, I don't know. Does he get more money?
But you say we, Carolyn, and it's not we. Look,
It's not a we. It's I mean, we are all collectively working
No,
together.
I understand, but if you're trying to figure out, if you're looking for things that seem to be contradictory, you're talking about
I'm
different
not looking for
people.
anything. I'm saying that
You're
did he?
describing some, let me
Yeah.
say. But look, there was a proposal by Michael Huff, who was endorsed by the sheriff recently, to increase his salary to $175,000 a year. That did not get the substantial enough support from our Frederick County delegation to advance to, the state house and Senate as a local courtesy bill, et cetera. And they asked some good questions and tried to make some comparisons to what is the sheriff being paid in other full service law enforcement agencies in comparable or larger, smaller counties, and what kind of fits in there. And they made it 140,000 for a couple of years, I think. This is all recent, and I haven't read it yet in detail. And then 150,000, and then it'll get revisited again in the future. And so it didn't end up at 175,000.
Great.
I don't necessarily think that, and when I think about what is the appropriate level of pay for a sheriff in Frederick County with more than 400 employees and the range of responsibilities that he or she would have, I separate that issue from who is the sheriff and whether I think he's the best or right person for the job, or whether I would support him being reelected. I mean, I don't, just to be perfectly clear.
Everybody heard that. Kai does not support it, so that's more reason why you should vote for Kai.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's going to be any Democrats running for this office in our primary or any of the other offices in the county who probably are going to vote for Sheriff Jenkins. I have been critical of him in a number of different respects.
You've been very vocal also, so I appreciate that.
Well, I have been frustrated that he's even not that long ago, he was on video saying that he thought that the COVID was a hoax and that he wasn't going to support any of Hogan's measures on that. He is a believer in the big lie. He continues to maintain that Trump really won the election. He is climate change denier, although that's not at all related to his job right now. So we'll skip that one for a moment. And this is where I have talked with him in public venues on multiple occasions with the full council and others, and on the radio and other places. He maintains that there is zero systemic racism in law enforcement or our judicial process in Frederick County, in Maryland, and in the entire country. And if that seems like, well, that's probably not what he said or not what he meant, I have given him multiple opportunities, expressed it that clearly and more, and he has reinforced it multiple times. He simply does not believe in systemic racism is not a thing. Now, I've pointed out to him that there are studies that show that at 14 different levels of the process, from the first encounter with a law enforcement officer to the end of the judicial and even punitive process, right? Prison, bail, parole, the whole spectrum, that at every single one of those steps, there's statistical evidence, clear and obvious over time, that there's disparities that are not explained by any of the other things you can control for, income and geography and education and all these other things. And yet, in spite of that, he doesn't have any problem, just simply saying it's all bull. None of it's true. It doesn't exist. It's not a problem. All law enforcement and the judicial process in this country is colorblind, and we know it's not. And when someone in his position is not even open to that idea or willing to take an honest look at the disparities and the statistics and the demonstrable facts and just be in absolute denial about it. When you add that to what I've heard anecdotally from many people about different experiences and stuff that I'm not going to take up the rest of our time to talk about right now,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I have a legitimate concern. That's not the only area in which I have a disagreement, but that's a pretty big one in our community.
Thank you for that. Well, I have to say, I agree with you. And I know you've been very vocal, and I've also been very vocal that, yeah, you cannot keep hiring racists and electing racist people. So, want to change stuff.
And even beyond that, you have to understand the way that things that have been built into the system over time
Mm-hmm.
are, contributing to those inequities and to those disparities, and address them. And if you don't think there's a problem, you're not looking for it, you're not finding it, you're not addressing it, you're
Nope.
not improving it. I mean,
And we always say hate has no home here. So let's not just say it, let's actually act by it and get the right people in and the wrong people out.
I'm all for
So
that.
I want to say, Kai, you did really well. And you have it's your show now. You need to tell people why they should vote for you. And yeah.
Okay. Well, because
Is that it? Is that it right there? Is that your
no, that's
website?
just one. It's just one handout I just happen to have right here.
Okay, you want to put it up?
Well, you have an awful. Our website is down at the moment. It'll be
Is it
back up.
down?
Well, there's a splash page. We're revamping it. You don't have to all that other stuff in your URL. It's just kaihagen.com. So, people go to kaihagen.com in another week or so, it'll be back up with a whole new set of, platform sections and other things. So we're very excited about that. And we'll have an announcement. We'll put it out in email and everything else. We're working on new mailers and everything, but we have some already. Can you see?
I can see it.
I like this one, but committed to honest, responsive, effective government that works for all people. And this talks about education, talks about working families, talks about smart growth, sustainable development, equity, all on here. But and so the people will be getting things like that in the mail, et cetera, before too long as the campaign picks up. But essentially, as I said at the beginning, I think I'm the right person at the right time. I know Frederick County government extremely well. I've paid extremely close attention to it, served as a county commissioner, which is part of the executive branch for 4 years, watched, attended, commented, engaged, even when I haven't been in office, fully on a broad range of issues related to land use, the environment, equity, and other things. Just very involved in the community, lots of different boards and commissions, from park and rec to affordable housing and the tourism council, and even the Fountain Rock Nature Center, just all sorts of things. And then writing and providing leadership on some issues, working in local communities across the county, various municipalities, on issues that really matter to the people there for over 2 decades. And then I've had another 3 years on the county council, becoming very familiar with that new charter, government, and the relationship with the council and the county, the council, and the county executive. And I understand the role of county executive. And I think, as I said, if I have to encapsulate it, I think we need somebody who is going to protect what we love about where we live.
Mm-hmm.
And that means, and we didn't even talk about agricultural preservation and the environment and stuff, which I thought we were going to get into and would love to say some things about, don't have time for now, but some other time maybe. And, but that's a top priority for me. It's been a high priority. It's been a high priority for Jan Gardner and the current council, and it'd be a top priority for me. I think it's really important, in concert with smart growth, to grow in a way that preserves our rural landscape, our agricultural economy, the separateness of our individual municipalities and unincorporated villages, et cetera, and protecting our environment at the same time, with an eye towards our quality of life and climate and everything else. But so protecting what we love about where we live. Then maintaining and protecting what we do well now. We have great parks and libraries and schools and and so many things about our community, that we have a AAA bond rating. We have an economically diverse community that's been attractive to a lot of different kinds of businesses, and we need to maintain the quality of our services, our AAA bond rating, the quality of our facilities. The things that we're doing now will not be at risk for me. I understand them. I'm committed to preserving them. We will not do anything that jeopardizes maintaining the quality of those services and the value of what Frederick County government does in the areas that people are very familiar with, and the ones they don't often see or interact with: public health and animal control and water and sewer, waste management, and others. And then I think I'm also the right person to focus on some of the things we can do better. And there are things we can do better. And not because necessarily we've been doing it all wrong, but just because there are more tools or more commitment, or the times are changing and the challenges growing around issues like affordable housing and environmental protection and ag preservation and land use planning and equity issues and education, as I talked about for a while. We can do better in some of those things. And government's about balancing, priorities, and the best plans are the ones where it's not one thing or the other, because you're coming up with solutions that have multiple benefits and solve multiple problems. And when it comes to things like affordable housing, for example, we're not even beginning to use all the tools in the toolbox. We've got a lot of nonprofit organizations, governmental organizations, good programs, some legislation, accessory dwelling units and MPDUs and all this other stuff. And yet the problem is getting worse. It's like we've built a bigger bucket to bail it out, but it's not as big as the holes that are leaking, and the problem is getting worse, even though it seems like we're doing a lot.
We're doing a lot, but we're not all doing it together.
Well, and we're not doing enough. We're not using all the tools that we have around land use and planning and other things to really advance, and smart growth principles and other kinds of commitments to really advance and build the kind of houses my in-laws lived in, an 1,100 square foot house in a nice neighborhood with a decent, school and nearby parks. And we don't even build those anymore. But there's a lot of tools we have that we can use more effectively to advance that, which doesn't mean it's going to not be an issue in our community. So there are all these things. Climate change is another area where we, as we've talked about, we have to do better. Education, where we've done a lot of really good things and have a lot to be proud of, but we have to do better. And I think I'm the right person to do that. And I don't have, like I said, I've never had any political ambitions. I'm only doing this for the right reason. I've been involved in the community, and I backed into running for office and serving as an elected official, and had no interest in ever working for any kind of office or campaigning for any kind of office outside of Frederick County, which has been my focus for the 25 years that I've lived here, and wherever I've lived for my whole adult life. And I think I just bring that right combination of experience, knowledge, commitment, committed to absolute, the maximum level of public openness and transparency and engagement as possible. That's why, one of the first things I did when I was a county commissioner in 2006 was work to get the county put online, so our meetings could be seen by people who didn't have cable, and could be seen by them hours later or days later or weeks later. It's just openness and transparency is really important. But we have a lot of challenges and not enough time to talk about all of them. But
we do not. But you covered a lot of them. But I think when we have to vote June 28th, vote for the right people. We need to work together from top to bottom, from local to state. And we can, like Kai said, we have a lot of things that are great, but are not, somehow we're still like in the mix. So
it's a changing, evolving world. We're faced with old and new challenges.
We have to work together, Kai. We got to work together. So thank you so much, Kai, for coming on the show. I wish you all the best and good luck on your campaign, and go get them. Thank you.
And if I could finish with one point, it's that anybody, anytime, can email me or call me or whatever. My email address, the best one to use, is kaihagen@gmail.com. It doesn't get much easier to remember than that, as long as you remember to spell my name right. And my phone number, and my personal cell number is 240-405-2536. So
25, what is it?
2536. It's the square of 5 and the square of 6. Anyway, never mind that. But just one way to remember it. But people are welcome to call me, text me, Facebook message me, send me an email, try to get together. We're going to need people to host events, knock on doors, distribute literature, deliver signs, attend events, make contributions. There's a lot of different ways to help. And I would love to hear from people, whether they can help and they want to help and they're committed to helping, or they're not even sure yet and they just want to talk about an issue that we didn't cover tonight, or that they want to ask some more questions about. I'd love to talk to them. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. There's information, guys. Write it down. And if you missed it, you can always record a video so you can see it.
Yeah.
Thank
Is this going
you.
to be available on Facebook for folks after the fact?
Say it again.
Is this going to be available for folks on Facebook?
Yeah, it doesn't go away. It's available. It's available on YouTube and Facebook.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
Yep. So okay. Thank you so much, Kai.
Thank you. When you send me the links, I'll share them. Take care, everyone.
I will. Thank you again.